Warm welcome to Phil Craig on a big day for you guys, Phil.
Yeah, hi Alec, nice to be with you again. Yes, a good day for us today. Yes.
Cape Independence Advocacy Movement has been at it for how long?
Our organisation, that the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, or the CIAG, for those that that don't want to spit their teeth out, we've been going for about 18 months. Although obviously there were people who were pursuing independence for longer than that, but yeah, we've been going for 18 months.
And maybe just explain to those who haven't seen your press statements today why it's such an important or relevant day for us to be talking.
So we called for a referendum on Cape Independence, and this is something we've considered quite carefully in terms of the timing. So we called on Premier Alan Winde to call a referendum, and we then met with the presidency, and we formally notified President Ramaphosa of our call for a referendum, which we handed to Premier. Now we've done it. We've pressed the button. We formally want a referendum.
So, what's the symbolic relevance of this?
Well, look, so I think it's a good question, because I think a lot of people have the sort of misconception that a referendum is the end of the process as opposed to the start of the process. And a referendum under South African law isn't binding unless the parties choose to make it binding. So at this point in time, what we're trying to establish is, what do the people of the Western Cape want? So effectively, what we're talking about is democracy, and that's always been our position. You know, we're bipartisan. We represent people from across the political spectrum, and first and foremost, consult with the people of the Western Cape, understand that things are going horribly wrong in South Africa. We're all looking for solutions. The solution that we've put on the table is independence for the Western Cape, and we want to democratically consult with the people of the Western Cape and find out how they feel about it. And I think whether people support Cape independence, whether they oppose Cape independence, or whether they're neutral on the issue, I think all Democrats should recognise that this is a significant issue which now clearly has widespread support, and to democratically consult with the people of the Western Cape is so obviously the right thing to do that we just need to get on with it.
It looks a little opportunistic in its timing, and I say this because the Democratic Alliance has been, well, muted on its position on Cape independence. Is this intended to make the DA actually come out and support it, or support the referendum one way or the other?
Well, yes, to a certain extent, not just the DA, but clearly the DA, as the party of provincial government in the Western Cape, are fairly critical to. Seen from Cape Independence is that the tail is trying to wag the dog, which is right. We've got this scenario where actually there's 3 million voters in the Western Cape. Let's assume that 1 million of them are going to vote for the ANC and a couple for the EFF. Whatever happens, that leaves 2 million. Let me call them relatively sane, sensible people who are looking for solutions. We know from polling, which we've done twice now, that roughly 1.4 million of those 2 million voters are favourable towards Cape independence. So it's a really significant number of people, and politically, that's significant. And at this point in time, where the political parties are going to the polls, then clearly this is a discussion that we want to have. And actually, it's interesting you bring it up, because we're busy working on a voting guide, which we hope to have released by the end of the week. And we have written to all of the major political parties and asked their position on two questions. Do they support Cape independence? And perhaps more critically, support a consultation with the people of the Western Cape in the form of a referendum on Cape independence. And we're going to release that at the end of this week. And I think it's going to shock an awful lot of people. At this point in time, there are already 6 parties who are behind a referendum on Cape independence, some of which who haven't publicly so far declared their support for a referendum on Cape independence. They don't all necessarily support independence outright. and we're still waiting for 4 more. And I suspect that number of 6 is going to increase. So I think by the end of this week, we're going to be in a situation where a referendum on Cape Independence is a virtual certainty. And I think it's going to be extraordinarily difficult for the DA to not call a referendum on Cape Independence. They've already, they promote autonomy for the Western Cape already. They are already brought this private members bill to fix the legislation so a referendum can take place. It would really be quite an extraordinary move if virtually all the major parties in the Western Cape supported a referendum on Cape Independence, apart from the one that was bringing the referendum legislation. And I think the DA don't support Cape Independence outright at this point in time. Reasons they're cautious of the country, although perhaps that's something we should discuss, because I think perhaps either that they've misunderstood. But at very least, that 58% of, we know from our polling that 58% of people in the Western Cape want a referendum. We know that raises to 65% amongst DA voters. We know the majority of DA voters want independence outright. So I think they absolutely have a moral obligation to consult with the people of the Western Cape in a referendum on Cape Independence, and actually we fully expect them to do so.
What is the likely outcome if the DA keeps dragging its heels? Because in this instance, it's a political hot potato. If they were to come out and say, for instance, support a referendum in the Western Cape, it must be used by the ANC against the DA in other parts of the country. And it really is right now in probably the strongest position, not probably, definitely the strongest position it's been in since 1994. So is that something that you took into account in the timing of handing over the formal application?
Well, so yes, it is. And look, let's be clear: the referendum can't actually be called now. It'll probably take about 18 months, I'm guessing, before all of the legislative hurdles are out the place. So I would expect us to see a referendum in about 18 months' time. But of course, clearly there are going to be there's going to be two pressure points every 5 years: the local government elections and the national elections. And actually, every time we come to this, the DA will be able to roll out the same argument and say, well, hang on a second, please don't do this to us now. But actually, this is the only point in time where they really got their backs against the wall. And I think actually, and I think in some ways they've misunderstood two things, in our opinion. Look, I should say in our opinion. So first of all, one of the things that Corné Mulder talks about a lot for the Freedom Front, who face this same problem of being a national party where the majority of their voters are actually outside of the Western Cape. And Corné always says, look, it's not an either or, it's an and and an and. And I think, and this is something we have. Absolutely, you don't have to go outside of the Western Cape, anything but. Actually, what you have to do is you have to use, we understand that we're in a crisis situation. You have political power, and you have to use the fullest extent of your political power everywhere that you can. And where you're the provincial government and of this disaster and away from the ANC completely, you must do that. That doesn't mean you abandon your voters in Johannesburg or in Nelson Mandela. Where you can be the metro government, you must be the metro government. Where you can be in a municipality, then you must be the municipal government. And actually, perhaps you're none of those things up in Limpopo, but actually you have some wards and you can form structures on the ground. So actually, what we suggest to the DA is they should take that approach and say, look, we will protect everybody who votes for us to the fullest extent of the powers that we have. And in the Western Cape, where we have the most powers, we're best placed to protect those people. But the other thing that I think the DA really is missing a trick on is I think they're assuming that their voters in the rest of the country don't think that's the case. That might be a more difficult decision in the rest of the country. But I think we've got this ideological divide, and we see it all the time. Probably the majority of our most fervent supporters live outside of the Western Cape, because people who are outside of the Western Cape see much more so than people in the Western Cape just how disastrous this is and just how close we are to implosion. And I think an awful lot of people outside of the Western Cape want to have an ally, want to see the DA be able to show what they can show what you can do when you control tax money, when you actually are the national government. Use that, then they're going to have massive influence over the rest of South Africa, and actually use that as a showcase. And that's exactly how the DA got to where they are now. Helen Zille started off by being the mayor of Cape Town, from managing the Cape Town very well. Then people saw around the areas that, hang on a second, and then they got the province, the Western Cape, and show what can be done, support other people, and the best obviously will come to the rest of South Africa, that the DA is a better option for government than the ANC or the EFF.
So what happens now? You've handed over formally your application for referendum. Is there a time period in which you need to be answered?
Well, look, we've asked Alan Winde to call a referendum within 90 days of the referendum legislation being in place, and that doesn't mean that the referendum is going to take place in those 90 days, but actually then he will agree a time together with the IEC, and then they'll fix this date. So tie them to a very specific date, because clearly, a referendum is a major task, and there'll be other considerations too. So they've already got the private members bill before Parliament. So we say, look, get that bill through Parliament, get that bill passed, and then within 90 days of it being passed, just assure us that you're going to call a referendum. It doesn't just have to be on Cape Independence, by the way. We understand that the Constitution allows for these multi-question referendums. So actually, we envisage that referendum lots of different things. The things that they're really pushing for: control of the police, control of energy, federalism. The DA wants federalism. The AfriForum say they want tax federalism, which sounds a lot better than federalism. And obviously we're pushing for independence, and we would like to see a consultative referendum that has all of those things on the ballot paper. Clearly, we want Cape independence, but the DA is already going down that route. So I think we just we're all sort of dancing around this a bit because of the political sensitivities. But there is going to be a referendum on Cape Independence, and surely everybody can now see that in terms of how this is all lining up. And if we see what's already in the public domain, and we see what's already been declared, that then people must realise that a referendum is now inevitable, and let's just get on with it. And it's democracy after all.